Thank you guys for coming to my presentation of my research project that I've been working on for the past 6 months through the last 3 courses of my LSU Shreveport's program. And my research project has to do with the influence of standardized test scores and the courses that kids take, specifically art courses. So to give you a little bit of background research and prior research, things that I've had to look up and delve through, the arts foster creative and creative thinking skills with divergent thinking skills, which is a major 21st thinking skill that we need to make sure that the students have. Art teachers also enable students to have higher level reading comprehension than the use of higher order thinking skills, because we do read a lot. We dig into things and we take things apart. And we also offer explicit instruction for metacognition and visual arts and developing fluency and flexibility for divergent thinking. So they don't have to come out with one type of thinking, they have to think in many different ways. I believe there was a huge study that was done with art teachers around the world that asked, how do you teach art to your kids? And the results of this was that the art teachers nowadays are focusing on creative problem-solving skills. They're focusing on how kids are thinking, not skill development. Skill development was rated 8 out of 10. They really don't want the kids to learn how to draw a straight line. They want them to think. So the art teachers are kind of on the cusp of moving kids towards this different kind of thinking. There are also a lot of different arts integrated school initiatives that are moving throughout the country, to where they take a full art integrated curriculum and apply it to a whole school. And some of those results that have come out through that was the promoting of higher cognitive development and support overall in school achievement, like dropout rates decrease, attendance increases, students are participating more, students are excited, they actually want to be at school, because it's not just let's read a book and answer a question. And art education works with a range of skills and knowledge and application with active multi-modality teaching to encourage qualitative thinking and cognitive skills needed for the 21st century skill development that we're all pushing our kids towards. Now, interesting enough, Richard Baker in 2012, he's a Louisiana State Department worker now, he conducted a study to examine what a group of 8th grade students with their standardized scores looked like whenever he looked at their art courses that they were taking. He was a music major, so he focused on music. And what he discovered in his ex post facto study was that music education showed a huge increase. So students that took music classes, when they looked at their 8th grade LEAP scores, had higher LEAP scores than kids that did not. He also looked at art classes, but generally in Louisiana, if we think of our own elementary school, what do they take? Music. So since the arts are not promoted as much in the lower grades, that was kind of a gap in research, thus promoting me to say, well, let's look at what we do, because I know in the upper secondary realm, we teach a lot more arts versus this. So due to the lack of present completed research in the upper grades, focusing on grades 12 through 9, not 6 through 8, I wanted to look at a study very similar to what Richard Baker did, and I wanted to compare art course completion to a cohort of 12th grade students who took the ACT, which is a standard norm reference test that can't be taken apart. It is what it is. It has all of its facts, and it's been backed by tons of research. In their 11th grade year at a local rural public high school, a cohort of kids that did take art courses and didn't, but they all took the ACT test, so they had that in common. And the purpose of this study was to augment the case that art courses in the upper secondary level support and promote this higher level of it. Okay? So my research question was, do art courses have a positive influence on standardized test scores? And we had to come up with a null hypothesis, and at the end of the study we ended up rejecting the null hypothesis, which was good for my research study, because if we accepted this, that means there was no validity to the research. So the null hypothesis was the amount of art courses taken in the upper secondary level do not have a positive effect on the outcome of standardized test scores for high school juniors. So my method that I went along when I did this, it was very similar to what Richard Baker did. It was quantitative. I was just looking at numbers themselves. It was from a convenience sample. I knew the high school. I knew the group of kids. It was done ex post facto style, which means I didn't have to get anything currently from the student except for a signature saying they wanted to participate. It was all quantitative data from the year previous on file. And what I did was to compare students who have taken the standardized test to the variables of the ARC course completion. So the study was limited. I didn't want to use the whole school because of how our students are staggered with their transcripts and how they're ordered and taking courses. So what we did was I limited it to the 12th grade students who have a banked ACT score in their junior year. And what we did was I looked at the transcripts and the ACT scores. Demographics that I collected was race, gender, free and reduced meal status, also known as FARMS, and ARC course completions from their transcripts. 65 out of 170 possible students elected to participate from this specific cohort of students. They all returned and signed their permission forms with my internal review board. So the design for this study, so how do we set it up? I set it up as a dependent variable. I had composite scores because I ran 2 different ANOVA tests. One was for composite and one was for the raw ACT scores to further break it down. The independent variable was the completion of the ARC courses. In addition, I did look at race, gender, and FARMS. I had to remove some extraneous variables such as students with accommodations, gifted students, talented students, specific learning disabilities and exceptionalities, just to make sure that it was an even playing field and we weren't dealing with all these things pulling scores up and down for no reason. And we had to set up the ANOVA test with different variable codes. As you can see, we did a number system of 0, 1, and 2. Okay? The study itself had 3 objectives, and I figured it would be easier to break it down instead of having one broad objective with a bunch of things. So for objective 1, we compared composite ACT scores to students that completed 0 ARC courses, 1 ARC course, and 2. Objective 2 took the composite ACT scores, and then we looked at gender, race, and free and reduced meal status to see if there was another correlation that I could suggest from this. Objective 3, we took the raw ACT score, so I broke it down by subcategory of English, math, reading, and science, again to students that took no art classes, 1 or 2 or more. So I ran my first ANOVA analysis, and this was again to look at composite ACT scores. Right? And this was the ANOVA output right here. It's a lot of numbers, so we're going to skip through just to show you what the significant effect was. When we look at the composite ACT scores, it was a significant score at the 0.05 level, and it actually was significant at the 0.000 level, which means it was definitely a difference in these scores. I also went through and I did the post hoc comparisons, so that's our secondary text to back it up, and it was also significant. So when we look at none compared to 1, it was a significant difference. When we looked at none compared to 2, it also was a significant difference. But whenever we looked from 1 course to 2 course, there wasn't as big a significance, and it actually failed the Tukey test for the secondary test. So that was considered a non-significant number, just because it wasn't enough data to go through for that one. Now when we look at these, it's kind of good to see the bare breakdown comparisons of them. Students that took 0 art courses compared to students that took 1 art course, when we look at composite ACT scores, kids that took 1 class scored 4 points higher on average than kids that did not. Kids that took 2 or more art classes had 6 points, which is a big jump. And again, between 1 and 2 was not significant. So these results go back to what Richard Baker was saying, was that the art courses are actually showing this increase, and we're trying to figure out where this increase is coming from. Well, when we look at the art classes, it's showing us that the students are linking knowledge and that they're using this to generate and to figure out these questions on the test better. Okay? Students who took an art course were able to demonstrate higher knowledge and skill level on ACT tests versus ones that did not. Okay? Furthermore, there was an effect of frequency compared to ethnicity, but whenever I went and I did the second test for the Levine's test, it was not found tenable. And I found this to be true because when I went back and I looked at the raw demographics, I had a big scale in one race, a big scale in another, and Latino was 2. So this threw my numbers really off. So I decided to throw this out because I didn't think it was viable. Wasn't fair to compare 2 to 60 or 2 to 45. So we went ahead and we threw it out. So yeah, this is just looking at this. So it was significant for ethnicity, but it wasn't tenable. When we look at race, it ended up being not significant, and for free and reduced lunch data, it was not significant. And it's interesting to note that in other tests that I looked at in other research, these did come up as significant. So again, I think maybe this had to do with the population size, since I had a small group. I think if I had a larger group, it would have come out better. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the raw scores. And when we look at the raw scores, I'm going to quickly just show you what these were. So there was a significant increase for English scores between 1 and none and none and 2. And there was also a significance for math. You can definitely see the different scale. And all of these were significant, and they passed all post hoc testing. When we look at, this is reading. Reading had the biggest jump, to show you the difference between kids that took no classes to 1, just because the intense amount of reading that is involved in art that people generally do not think about. Science also had a really big jump. Okay, and just to show you again, all levels of this third test that we did with the second analysis for ANOVA was significant. So when we look at these, this is kind of the big part of it. Raw English scores, from no classes to 1, 5 points. No classes to 2, 7 points. Between 1 and 2 was 2 points. For math, a gain of 2 points, 2 or more, 4 points. 1 and 2, it's 2. When we look at reading, a score of 5 extra points. It's a big deal. That's a scholarship. So that's something that's really important to look at. When we look at 2 or more, 6. And over here for science, 4, 5, and 1. Okay? So these are showing really big increases. Now the limitations and the implications that we're going to look at, the initial implications of the small-scale study point to the positive effects of the outcome with what these students can actually do, but since it's a small-scale study, with this specific cohort of student, it was only at 38% of their total population. So some of these numbers are elevated just because of the fact the students that turned them in may have been a select group. I'm not quite sure because it was just random, whoever wanted to turn them in. But based upon the current results, increase in gains would not be expected. If we looked at all of them together, I don't expect these numbers to get bigger. I actually think they would get smaller and a little more realistic, but it's still a positive gain overall. So in conclusion, after reviewing these results, and with the review of literature, it would be seemed to be plausible to suggest a continued study on these effects. And that continued study would have to, involve using a bigger group and actually looking at more people to see what all these things go for. But again, and the last thing that's really important for me is this sentence right here. It said, it would be relevant area for continued study for a larger population to duplicate and validate these results and invite others to turn an opinion towards a favorable viewpoint of the effective benefits of art education for students, to show that we are teaching them divergent learning, critical thinking skills, problem-solving abilities, thinking stamina, and 21st century skill acquisition, instead of being a filler course that's not on ground level with courses. And students that take at least one course, it would extremely be beneficial to them to move it on up. Okay? Any questions or input? Yes?
Does the number of art courses depend on the higher level of the courses, or just any of the courses at all?
Any courses. Yeah, any courses. Go ahead.
I was just curious of maybe another question to look at, for example, like with the math and the science, like math, were the questions like more geometry level, those that are more visual, and then with the science, biology, more visual observation level things, did they do better on those particular areas?
That would be another good thing to dig into, yeah. Any other questions?
In these studies, how much was the socioeconomic status looked at?
It wasn't looked at as much just because I didn't think that the data that I had was deep enough to really take it apart. Because 72% weren't, and then 28% were. So I figured if that gap would have closed a little bit more, if I would have had a more diverse range of students, I actually would have been able to take that apart and see it more. Okay? Any other questions? I appreciate it.